different types of different levels, NetFlow consumption tools, collectors, as Cisco used to call them, Cranach NetFlow Tracker, and I was in Fluke and things like that. So my background is effectively NetFlow and the likes. Now, the point then about syslog and messaging is that where I've come from on that is effectively, I'm looking at a situation where I have a technology, be it a firewall or a proxy or a load balancer, that is IT infrastructure, is making decisions. And I'm so used to having structured data from NetFlow, where the router is making the decision whether to pass or not, whether it's going to mark the packet or not, that what I've looked at is saying, hang on a second now, this network infrastructure, IT infrastructure, needs to be able to tell me more. So what we've gone and done, Tim, is gone out to these systems, got them to send us whatever they can. More often than not, it's a basic syslog message. I have a term for it, I call it session syslog. Now, I made that up, right? So a lot of the technology, I'm prone to make stuff up. But just to give it a name, give it a differentiation. Because when you talk about logging, there's so many different types, so many different sources. I'm looking at specific elements. I'm looking at, there's a proxy. How good is that? The proxy is going to classify and identify the packet, going to decide whether to block it or not going to block it. It's going to tell me, in a lot of cases, who the user is and what IP that user is coming from. But again, I'm built as network centric. I can consume that. Now I do a few tricks to add value and to fit into my structure. So I take that session syslog and I'm going to make it into 2 flow records. And if people are familiar with flow and NetFlow, IPFix, it's unidirectional. So I'm making the session syslog back into unidirectional flows. And the whole idea is that we're going to make the IT infrastructure accessible to people that need to see it. All right.
In human data form too.
Yeah, exactly. In a way that actually humans can understand. I mean, we hear so much about machine learning and AI today, right? And it's one of the reasons I came into Viavi with my team, is that I saw the work that Doug and the team had achieved in such a short period of time. They'd taken packets. So they'd taken a bigger challenge than I had initially taken on scope. Well, they had more resources, I'll always say to him. But they had the smarts to basically take packet, create a metadata out of it, apply a machine learning algorithms to it, and derive a number, what they call end user experience, out of 10. Is it a good day or a bad day?
Yep.
Then the basis of that then was used to indicate to the human how good the different applications, different sessions were going. But also then, if it was a bad day, what was the problem domain? Was it client, server, network, or application? So I'm coming at it a different approach. I'm looking at, I've watched all the different NetFlow tools out there. I've watched all the different kind of SEMs out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to do something better, because if we're being hacked and we're having network issues, something's not stepping up. So my proposition is, I've got to get rich data, right? So you're right. There's very rich data in those logs. Let's consume them. There's very rich data in the infrastructure. We're not listening.
Yeah.
Right? So what we've had to do over the last couple of decades is learn how to embrace that data. So you've different types of data. I came up with this, again, you hear me coming up with a lot of stuff, stitched and enriched. So the stitched is on the screen there at the moment. What we've gone and done is go out to the network infrastructure and ask it simple questions, and then bring back that data and stitch it together. Who's the user? What's their IP? What's their host MAC address? What port are they on? What VLAN are they part of? What switch? And show me that over time, right? Now, I know people say about wireless, we can do wireless. The wireless controller is actually more verbose. The more scary infrastructure is the wired, because anyone can plug in.
Right.
But I have that data from simple sources. It's accessible. By having that data, what I then use that data to do is then when I get a flow record, or even get data from a session syslog off a proxy, and we said we know the user, we know the IP, wouldn't it be great to insert at that time the known MAC address to that log? So now that very important log that we took from the proxy that told me the user, the IP, the URL, the content type, right, is now added to what was the actual physical host that they were on. The proxy has no way of knowing that.
Right.
The network does.
Right.
So now I'm merging network information with proxy information. How much better is that?
Massively better, because you can see the entire event from, like you said, from the login, all the information about where he came from and how they flow through the network, what applications, what resources they're using. And this is especially important for people that are doing SecOps, because that added visibility helps you find out if something is aberrant. You know, it's such a great way to know your network, and that's our mantra this year.
Well, like if you look at, if you can imagine, Tim, you can picture this: somebody walking in from the SecOps team saying, we've seen this incident with 10, 20, 30, 40, and walking into the network team saying, can you tell me last Tuesday who had 10, 20, 30, 40? They're kind of going, looking at you going, are you mad? How many days, when do you need to know that? As opposed to us providing a platform that both NetOps and SecOps are using, right? And they can type it in and find whatever they want to do.
It's time and event correlated, which is very nice also.
Oh, absolutely. Because again, you know, as NetOps, if you think of NetOps is, you know, we're superhuman when we come with a black screen. We're Superman. We do show commands to beat the band, right? But the problem is you can't do a show command for last Tuesday.
Nope.
It's gone, right? But in NetOps perspective, we don't have a problem that we still have today from last Tuesday, so it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
We're kind of living in the real time in NetOps. SecOps doesn't have that luxury.
Nope.
Right? So, but it also leads to my pet rant, if you'll allow me, Tim, just for a minute, is that one of the things is that what struck me, when I came into Fluke many years ago as a little old Cranog, and I remember sitting around the table with the development teams, joint development teams, and somebody asked the question, how do you define site? And we all looked at each other because we know the penny had dropped. We understood we have no definition. There is no standard. There's no right, there's no wrong. And with that comes a massive problem. So if you can't even define a location because we don't have a standard, how do you define that idea of I have a MAC address, I have an end device, or do I call it a host? I can't even define what I'm going to call this thing, right?
Right.
What is the device that's in front of you? What's the name of the device that's in front of me that we're communicating on? What are we going to call it?
Yep.
Is it HP, a laptop, a notebook? What? We can't even define a name.
Right.
But if you take it 2 other steps, one other step is you have a username. A user, we call it, right, from the proxy.
Right.
But that's not the human being.
No.
That is their login, right? And we all have multiplicity of logins to different types of systems. So we can't have a definitive indication of who the human. And the last one is my pet one, applications. Yep. What do we call applications? How do we define it?
Right.
Because I'm going through a process at the moment with Ixia and Gigamon and all my friends in NetScalers and all these type of stuff that are sending me data and calling it an application. They're doing deep packet inspection. Do you think they're doing it the same way? Do you think they're using the same definitions?
No.
Who's right? It's the same packet. So you could have a packet leaving your undefined host, going to a router that has NBAR, going to a proxy that classifies by URL, going to a Palo Alto, right? That effectively is doing a different application. Oh, and by the way, there could be a Gigamon in the way there as well. That gives you, which of those are right? None of them are wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So the final way to describe the rant is we have no standards. So in the tooling industry today, there's no way for me to pass you data and us to know that it's the same data because we've no standards for who you are, where you are, what you have, and what you're talking. So when you're talking to a CISO, you say, I feel for you because the people that are working for you have no way to communicate.
Right.
That's my rant.
Well, no definition really makes talking difficult, especially when you're in the network world. Okay.
Oh, it's huge. But I put a little corollary to that as well. I would blame it on the fact that TCP/IP works so well. We're working on a very stable, reliable protocol.
Yep.
Well tested, more than well mature, like ourselves, Tim. And the fact is that it works, right?
Yep.
And there hasn't proved to be a need, right? Because you're raising the question, you're saying it's time for visibility. It's 2019, right? What are we doing saying we need to know what's on our networks? What does that say? We don't know, right?
A lot we don't know.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating time in the industry because of the security implications. Because if somebody gets in, there is nobody watching.
Right. In a lot of cases, nobody knows it. That's why breaches, on an average, are taking almost 200 days to find, and those are the ones that are reported. That doesn't include all the ones that data leaks go on for years. I mean, the Marriott data leak went on for at least 4 years that we know of. Okay.
And they made a mistake. So the point is, the really, really good guys don't get caught. The bad guys get caught.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it's low hanging fruit. Like I have a customer that had an issue with their DNS. Went to their logs, as you said, right? Because they weren't looking at. They were writing to the DNS to a log file, and then the log files filled up. It turned out they had 100 gigs of data exfiltration using DNS. Right. This is pharmaceutical industry.
Yep.
Right. So wouldn't it be nice to know what DNS is on your network? Wouldn't it be nice to know what the DNS requests are? And if the volume changes, things like that. I mean, this is basic stuff.
Well, it may be basic in the method and all that, but it's very complex for people that haven't been doing that. The SecOps is really new. SecOps is not something we've had since we started networking back in the 70s. And like you said, TCP/IP, Vince Cerf and Rob Kahn did a phenomenal job when they took the X25 and X75 model and turned it into a LAN model. And TCP/IP is rock solid. It's granite and it ain't going to move. The only thing I hope is we don't try to move it to IPv6 for a while. But
I just told you on that one. Hold on that one, Tim. Give me good reasons why. And I'm fascinated to hear it because I think I know why. But see, do we agree on this? Why would you not go to 6?
Well, in my humble opinion, anytime you have 400 or 500 standards, you've got so many standards that you don't have any standards. That's number one. Number two, when we did NG back in the 90s, we anticipated IPv4 could grow. We were going to grow the address field. We were going to grow security parameters. But then ITU and all these people got together and said, oh, we're going to let the whole world take part in IPv6. And what we've created is a monster that is not compatible. I just learned recently that a lot of companies that are selling computers are actually turning off IPv6 completely in their stack, where for the last 10 or 12 years, they've been pushing it, they're stopping. But IPv6, way too complex. The estimate is if we were told to switch to IPv6 tomorrow, it would cost the world between $5 and $8 trillion in loss, which is economic disaster.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating. You've hit one area that I think is important was the human context, right? The human readable form of the address, right? Is that it's 4 octets, 4 digits is human readable. You can remember it.
Right.
And this comes back to one of the things that drives me, right? One of the 2 reasons technically I came into Viavi was aspects to user interface, right? Because I take for granted that the second one is machine learning, right? If the guys have been able to craft that type of work on Packet, can you imagine what they could do with my data?
Right.
But the key to me, though, is you got to get human context, because machine learning is useless. If you give it crap, it'll produce crap, right? But if you don't have a human that can decipher and define and enrich the data set that you feed, and then has a context that they can understand and say, yeah, it got it right. know it got it wrong.
It's uniform. Right? It's uniform.
And that's the key to this. So the key is that my whole job initially is saying, right, we have got to get better IT infrastructure data, right? Embrace flow and break through any of the barriers, right? So it's fascinated me for years that we have had vendors out there that have embraced NetFlow IP fix, but nobody was listening.
Right.
Right. And what we're aiming to do now, given the scale and position we are, you can see us in the magic quadrant for what that is and what credibility gives us as Viavi, right? Because I'm not a vendor of any other technology other than performance and security in this context, right? So I'm not, I'm not producing an SD-WAN box tomorrow, right? I'm not in that competitive market, which means I can come in and say, right, produce data for me. Produce it in whatever form you want. Give it to me as syslog, give it to me as IP fix, give it to me as good old NetFlow. And between it, I'll get you a story that I can put in front of a human to say, it's good, secure, and it's produced, and it's network efficient. And then the last part then is I can begin to automate that data set then with the machine learning and watch what it picks out and then tune from there. And that's the agenda, because again, if you don't have the visibility, you can't effectively manage the infrastructure they have. Now I mentioned, again, a bit about SD-WAN. I'm fascinated by that. Obviously, the cloud, how the cloud works and where its data sets and its data points and its border. These are all key areas. They're changers and the disruptors in the infrastructure. And again, I think people are just letting this happen. Right? It's just happening in front of them. And that the technology has become reliable, that they're ignoring the fact that when there is an issue, be it intermittent poor performance or aspects of malicious data around their infrastructure, they're stuck. Right? And one of the big things I keep talking to people is hunt, learn to hunt. Right. Get the network people and get your security people and get them out there hunting.
Right.
And as you hunt, what I want you to do is leave breadcrumbs. I want you to define. If you see data that's undefined, right? We put in this thing called traffic groups. It's very simple. I have an address. What's it owned by? What do we call it?
Right.
Is it a subnet, an IP, a host, or whatever? If it's important, call it something that the human can read. So if you get your network hunters and your security hunters out there defining these traffic groups, then you can watch, I've got other talking to other. Okay, right. I've got undefined talking to undefined. That's not good. Start digging into this, right? And the more defined that you are, then you can start writing rules and the machine learning becomes more powerful.
Well, it's not just machine learning, but you can write better definitions for the usage of your network, because security is evolving to the point where now telling our employees, you can't do this or you only can do that. And they're not really sure of their own policies, if they're workable or not. And having this information is so important, especially as we enter into this new era of policies and legal battles. Just recently I worked on a case where a guy caused a breach in his company, and they had to determine whether or not it was criminal on his part or civil. And of course, he violated corporate rules. It's a civil matter. They decide they can't prosecute criminally because they don't have enough information. So this helps us build that evidence down the road too, because forensics, the next step for networking managers is going to be forensics of events.
Well, we've seen the benefit of CCTV in our lives.
Right.
I mean, the security benefits of it.
Yep, absolutely.
The road more secure because we know there's something recording and looking at. Why are we not trying to do the same in IT?
It's an evolution.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's an acceptance. I mean, what interests me as well is that the fact of what do people think in IT about flow, right? What's their perception? The perception is it's an old protocol 20 years ago. Cisco had a crack at it, did some work on it, then bought another company for a lot of money and do some more stuff with it, right? And there's a few other companies out there. It has fascinated me, the journey I've been on with this technology for 20-something years, that it's taken that length of time to even get to a point where it is usable. And again, I suppose where we've tried to break the boundaries of what we can consume and what we can present.
Right. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break ground today and talk about enriched flow records and the viability of it. And what, as Mike said early on, it's human. It's something we can understand. We have to define it a little more better, you know, and put it into our language so we know that, you know, Steve went to this, you know, used Amazon and went to this event, did this, did that. So it makes it more personal. And it becomes something we can organize, and we as people can understand it more. But I believe the biggest problem is, Mike, is I don't know anybody in NetOps, performance, security that has a lot of extra time to learn stuff.
Yeah, again,
it takes effort. It takes effort.
Do you know what that is, Tim? That's what I call the insincere objection, right? It's not a good reason. It's I'm too busy. Everybody's too busy, right? But the point is that by embracing this, you free yourself up.
Right. That's it. We got to get them over the fear.
Yeah. But it's also, what are they wasting their time on? Right?
Absolutely.
So, you know, it'll take me 4 days to find out that MAC address that John came in about 10, 20, 30, 40 through DHCP logs. Yeah, but if you had a system, he could type it in himself and find out within 2 seconds. So there's your 4 days back. Now, can we go and do something positive with the days you've lost?
Yeah, and it's an evolutionary thing. I mean, we're teaching people now about it. And, of course, Viavi's come up with a great device to help with this, make it human information. And also you got to remember, one of my favorite sayings, I know everybody laughs about it, but if you ever have to prove to a manager or to a courtroom or to anybody, you're usually dealing with 12 people that couldn't figure out a way how to get out of jury duty. And so you're not dealing with quantum physicists. So if you go to courtroom with a lot of bit byte nibbles and octets, people aren't going to understand that. And if people don't understand it, well, then how do we understand it? We have to interpret all that. And this is such an easier way of getting all of that deep flow information that is so important when you're trying to manage. And management, by the way, today is not just management, it's evolution. Your job every day may be to fix your computers or keep the network running or get the applications up, but it's also your ability to evolve your network. If you evolve your network, you got to evolve the people that are working in it.
Sure, it's a mindset. It's actually a belief in that the data is accessible. Again, I come across a lot of people, as you would, Tim, who will tell you, like you said, don't have time. The other insincere objection, oh, I tried that before and it didn't work.
Yeah.
It wouldn't scale, or I couldn't find the data, or, you know, this NetFlow thing, doesn't that hurt routers and things like that? All rubbish, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, so again, that's what I have to do, or deal with, is that's, as I say, these insincere objections. I mean, the data is there. I mean, I worked on the bank there last year who, I got to be careful, right? Who were still hadn't deployed NAC, right? So what you're doing is you're relying on scanners then to know what's out there on the wired infrastructure.
Right.
What was interesting was that I ran my application and they wanted to compare me with my competitor, the scanner, right? So the discussion was, how many devices have you found, Mike? I have 54. And they said, well, we know of 51. Obviously, you must have double accounted somewhere. So we checked them, one for one. And I had 4 devices. Turned out they were the 4 ATM machines, right? But it gets worse. So I've got the 4 ATM machines. They don't. Why not? Because ATM machines don't reply to pings or any kind of scan. But not only did I know I had the 4 ATM machines, I could tell the 4 switch ports they were plugged into. And my next comment was, why are they on the same VLAN as everything else? Printers, right? Notebooks, the teller machines, all of this, right? And in our day, Tim, you walked into a bank and it was bulletproof glass and every piece of technology and every human seemed to be behind that, right? Now it looks like a coffee shop, right? With technology all over the place. The challenge was, not only did they not know that the device be it an ATM machine, was in the same VLAN as your printer that was exposed within the office area. They also didn't know, they also assumed that there was 2 address structures and that meant 2 VLANs. It didn't. They were using some secondaries, right? The next point was I could show them that these ATM machines were communicating with 3 certain application servers. They could tell me 2 of them, what they were. They couldn't give me the name for the 3rd, right? So what I showed them then was how we could, with the software, find every ATM machine, right? Because we could see the MAC vendor, right? There was about 3 or 4 MAC vendors. Then what we could do is we say, we'll define for you the 3 applications these ATM machines are supposed to talk to. If they communicate with anything else, that becomes an exception, right? That's the type of level we want to work to.
Right, and that's where this enriched flow capability, or visibility as I call it, comes in hand so well.
Yeah, you have to have the breadth. You have to have that MAC address.
You got to reach out. You got to try different things. If you're still using something that's 2 years old, it's out of date. Move on.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's something that the challenge, the other challenge that comes up a lot, Tim, you've probably heard this time and time again as well. Oh, I have a tool for that, or I have a tool for this, right? Now, if you go back to my original rant saying, well, we've no standards, having 20, 30 tools isn't the answer. If 20, 30 tools are 20, 30 silos,
right?
So one of the things I'm proposing within Viavi is that we are hell-bent on building a platform that is open, right? So the point will be, we want to be the translator, the medium, the mediator. I don't know, whatever term you can come up with to allow different vendors communicate, right? So an IDS communicate with an AV agent, as in to know it's there or not there on that client, right? So they can do their funky stuff on the IDS, the agent can understand something else. Right. So it's because we can see the problem. We see it as lack of standard. So we're not today or tomorrow, and you know the ritual that takes to build a standard, right? The time delay. So what we're saying is, let's embrace the problem. Let's go and say, okay, we have the network. We have the infrastructure defined as regards connectivity. We have it defined as regards communication capability. We have it defined as regards what is said and communicated on that infrastructure as derived by our technology as packets, right through to flow, right through to session syslog, right? And say, right, what can we do with this? Right.
It's very powerful. It's very powerful. And
well, that's the game. It has to be. I mean, there's no point producing another naughty little tool and putting slapdash graphics on it and say it does X, Y, Z. I mean, the point is, that's where we're behind the curve at the moment. We've got the power within the data that we have. What I want to unleash, and you'll see us unleashing this, is the power of context presentation capability, right? And then marrying that, because the machine learning is kicked in to bubble what we need to bubble up, right? There's another little aspect as well I just wanted to kind of just raise as a teaser as well. One of the other challenges that companies like ourselves have faced when a company did embrace flow or extended flow is that they went verbose. They went and produced, not like NetFlow would have, the original NetFlow back in 96 had about 15 fields in it, all right?
Yeah.
We store about 30 and index 30 ourselves, right? So that's double what most people would expect.
Right.
But there are companies now producing very, very verbose data, structured data. Name companies later on and another chance. And we found a way now to allow them to send us anything they want. And we can store it in an adjacent field, an extra field that we've created. That should hopefully encourage. And do you remember I made up that title of mine, partner director, and we were discussing how did you make that one up. Part of what I'm trying to do then is go to the vendors to help them to translate and say, look, throw the data at me. Okay, give it to me in syslog, but if you give it to me in structured data, I can do more, and I can do more quickly.
Right.
Right. So there's a journey we're on. You're catching us very early in the journey. I'm only in a few months. I think ourselves and Viavi got on so well. I've really enjoyed. It's kind of, I don't know if you know this, but there's a lot of old flute people. It's
yeah, I do.
Yeah, so there's a lot of us that worked together before in different guises, and I think we're in where we're fully and properly supported. I won't say we're cocooned. We're, we deal with the real world. We sell and we make money in our division. But the point is that we have the opportunity, and that was the key. We have the opportunity to take on some of these bigger challenges I'm discussing and hopefully deliver against them.
Absolutely. Now, Mike, Brad, do you want to say anything and kind of tell us your last thoughts?
No, I think Mike's done a great job in terms of talking about how we've brought him and others into Viavi with the enriched flow record, combining kind of the extended or standard flow with some of these other capabilities, user identity and session syslog information that Mike spoke to earlier, and then combining it with the long tradition of Viavi of packet level capture analytics, and bringing those together and bringing them to bear both for the NetOps and SecOps teams. And I think that's the key takeaway here, that we're building something great and something that we can take forward, start applying both machine learning and other types of technology to it, while still allowing users to go, as Mike talked about, go hunting.
Right.
We feel will be part of the overall tool set that folks in IT teams should be able to do.
Yeah.
That's what I'd summarize.
Yeah. And Mike, you had any last thoughts you want to talk about?
I'm afraid to. I'll start another rant.
Hey, when you get old, you can rant more. I love that part.
But thank you, thank you for having us on today. Very much appreciated, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely.
Well, let me summarize. I think that, and this is only video one, we're going to have Mike back later, and we're going to have him actually show us the capability, actually show us some of the data, the methodology of interpretation. But like he said early on, we got to define things. We got to build it in a human format so we can understand it. And we got to build the collateral behind it, which is maybe every bit, byte, nibble, and octet. But since we can't read every bit, nibble, and octet in a minute, we could have flows that will give us more visibility. And they say enrich, it'll also enrich our capability of helping our network grow and making it safe. Mike, I want to thank you today. Brad, thank you for being here. I wish everybody out there a great day. And watch Network Datapedia. We'll have another session with Mike here pretty soon. Goodbye to everybody. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Cheers.